I never expected to hear from a lawyer about land I barely remembered. When the call came, telling me I'd inherited a piece of my grandfather's property, I felt a strange mix of curiosity and nostalgia. "It belonged to your grandfather," the lawyer said. "It's now legally yours." I sat back, heart pounding. Grandpa had always talked about that land, how it held memories of our family's past and dreams for the future. I remember sitting on his porch, listening to his stories of that old oak tree and the creek that ran through the middle. "That land's been in our family for generations," he'd say. I hadn't been back in years. Work, life, and distance had pulled me away. But now, with the inheritance in hand, I felt a responsibility awakening inside me. Driving there felt like stepping back in time. But the sight that met me was nothing like the peaceful place Grandpa described. Bright orange construction fences sliced through the trees. Heavy machinery rumbled nearby. Workers shouted orders, clearing paths and tearing into the earth. "Hey! Wait!" I called out, jogging toward a suited man who stepped forward with a clipboard. "You're trespassing," he said flatly, eyes cold behind dark glasses. "This land is under development. We have all the legal permits." "Legal permits?" I echoed, heart sinking. "I just inherited this property. I have the papers right here." He glanced at the documents, then shrugged. "You might have inherited it on paper, but these permits were approved before your claim. The development is moving forward." I swallowed hard, frustration boiling. But I wasn't informed. No one asked me. This was family land. He smirked. "The law doesn't care about family stories. It cares about permits, contracts, and signatures. You'd better talk to a lawyer if you want to challenge us." Walking away, my mind spun. How could this be happening? How could they bulldoze over my grandfather's legacy without even a word to me? I sank onto a fallen log, fists clenched. "This can't be right," I whispered to myself. The land meant more than dirt and trees. It held history, memories, and hope. I felt the weight of loss settle over me, but beneath it, a fierce fire ignited. They weren't going to erase what my family fought for. Not without a fight. "I'll figure this out," I promised quietly. "I'll stop this. For Grandpa. For us." The quiet determination in my chest was the only thing steady as I stared out over the land being torn apart. My journey was just beginning. I headed straight to the county land registry, determined to get answers. When I sat down with the clerk and asked to see the documents related to my grandfather's land, I expected clear proof I owned it. Instead, confusion stared back at me. "Wait, this can't be right," I said, scanning the papers. "These titles, they show multiple owners in the last year, and some of these signatures don't match anything in my family records." The clerk shrugged. "It's complicated. Sometimes ownership transfers get messy, especially with developments and liens." That night, a letter arrived, cold and official. "Cease and desist all claims on the property," it read. Signed by the developer's lawyer, it declared I had no legal right to the land. "Your ownership is contested, and the contracts in place supersede any inheritance claims," it said. I reread the letter over and over, disbelief twisting inside me. How could they claim that? I never saw these contracts, never signed anything. At dinner, I laid everything out to my family. They say I have no right. They've got paperwork I've never seen. My sister shook her head. "You don't want to get tangled in this. Developers have deep pockets. It's not worth the fight." My dad, however, gripped my arm. "You owe it to Grandpa to try. That land means more than just property. Don't let them steamroll you." I also talked to neighbors. Some looked at me with pity. "Let it go, kid. These things drag on forever." Others, especially older folks, nodded solemnly. You're doing the right thing. That land's part of our history. The more I talked, the heavier the burden felt. Powerful people were closing ranks. The legal letters, the veiled warnings, I felt isolated. Sitting alone late one night, I whispered to myself, they think I'll back down. But I can't. This is my family's legacy. I have to dig deeper. I pulled out old letters and photos Grandpa left me. I made a promise in the silence, I'll uncover the truth. No matter how long it takes. The responsibility weighed on me like a storm cloud, but beneath it, a burning fire grew. This fight wasn't just about land, it was about justice, about honoring the past. And I was ready to face whatever came next. I spent the next few days buried in old archives, surrounded by musty papers and faded photographs. The local library's records room became my second home. I tracked down property deeds dating back decades, cross-referencing them with family letters Grandpa had kept. At Mrs. Ellis's house, the elderly woman who'd lived next door to Grandpa for years, I found stories I hadn't heard before. Your grandfather was a good man, she said, eyes shining. He fought to keep this land safe. It meant everything to him. Her voice shook when she showed me a letter Grandpa wrote, warning about developers trying to sneak in and claim parts of the neighborhood. Back at my place, I spread out the documents. Something didn't sit right. Look at this, I told my friend Jamie, a paralegal who agreed to help. These deeds have been altered, signatures that don't match any records, dates that jump around. Jamie leaned in, flipping through papers. This isn't just sloppy paperwork. It's fraud. Someone's forging documents to make it look like they own your land. My heart raced. But who? And how deep does this go? That night, I found a note slipped under my door, no words, just a picture of the bulldozers at my grandfather's land. A warning. My phone rang, but when I answered, silence. Fear crept in, but I pushed it aside. They want me to back off, I told Jamie the next day. But I can't. Not now. She nodded. We'll be careful. Document everything. They'll try to scare you, but truth has power. I sat alone later, staring at the moonlight filtering through my window. My mind churned with questions. How far was I willing to go? How much could I risk for this fight? Grandpa's voice echoed in my memory, justice isn't easy, but it's worth every step. I clenched my fists. This isn't just about property. It's about who we are. I owe it to him, and to myself, to keep digging. Hope and dread warred inside me, but I refused to let fear win. Finding a lawyer who actually believed me felt like a small miracle. When I walked into Jenna's office, she didn't blink at my story or the stack of questionable documents I carried. This isn't just a fight over land, she said, eyes fierce. It's about exposing corruption. I want in. Pro bono. Relief washed over me. That evening, I went to the neighborhood association meeting, hoping to find some allies. The room was packed with faces I recognized, some anxious, others wary. When I shared what I'd uncovered, heads nodded. You're not alone, Mrs. Thompson said quietly. They tried to bulldoze my garden without warning last year. Another man spoke up, same here. They've been pressuring us all to sell. A few neighbors stepped forward with their own stories of harassment, fines, denied permits, threats. Our voices, once scattered, began to form a chorus. We've been silent too long, Jenna whispered during a break. This momentum can't stop now. But the opposition was quick to respond. Flyers appeared overnight with my photo, twisted words accusing me of stirring trouble, wasting resources, even lying about the land. The HOA president, a sharp-tongued woman named Evelyn, made public statements dismissing me as a troublemaker. I heard whispers on the street, felt eyes avoid mine, and worst of all, the strain grew at home. My partner, exhausted from my obsession, asked, "Is this fight worth losing everything else?" The question cut deep, and I barely held back tears. Still, when I stood alone late at night, the loneliness was crushing, but so was the growing strength I found in our shared fight. "We're not just fighting for me," I told Jenna over coffee. "We're fighting for all of us." She smiled, eyes bright. "And that's why we'll win." With Jenna by my side, I dove deeper into the tangled mess. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a stack of emails and contracts. Bribery. Municipal approvals forged after the fact. And illegal zoning changes pushed through without public notice. I rubbed my forehead, stunned by the depth of their corruption. The next day, I stood before the city council at the public hearing. My heart pounded as I faced Mr. Collins, a local official known for cozy ties with developers. "These documents show clear discrepancies," I said, voice steady. "Can you explain why the signatures on these permits don't match any authorized personnel?" The room held its breath. Collins shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. "There might have been clerical errors," he mumbled, "but I assure you, everything was above board." His evasiveness sparked a flashback, Grandpa's words ringing in my ears. "Son, greed will try to swallow what's rightfully yours. Stand firm, no matter the cost." I clenched my fists, the weight of his legacy fueling me. Back with Jenna, we filed formal complaints with the state attorney general and federal agencies. "This is just the beginning," she said grimly. "They'll push back harder." She wasn't wrong. One afternoon, I caught sight of enforcers hired by the developers lurking near my property line. They moved with menace, a silent warning. I felt a chill but refused to retreat. "This land means everything," I whispered to myself. "I won't be intimidated." Every step forward tightened the knot of fear in my gut, but also strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for dirt and trees, I was defending a family's honor, a community's future. Jenna's voice echoed beside me, calm but fierce, "We have evidence. We have truth. And that's more powerful than any threat." I nodded, swallowing my fear. For Grandpa, for myself, I would keep fighting. I woke that morning to an empty folder on my desk, where the original deed, the heart of my case, had been just hours before. Panic surged through me. "It's gone," I whispered, hands trembling. How could something so crucial vanish? Was someone trying to bury the truth? That same day, whispers turned into shouts. Flyers appeared, accusing me of fabricating evidence, spreading lies about the developers. Social media buzzed with rumors, painting me as a troublemaker. Even neighbors I thought were allies kept their distance. One evening, my sister pulled me aside. "I know it's hard, but don't let them break you," she said, eyes fierce. "Remember why you started this, for Grandpa, for the land. We're with you." Her words cut through the fog of doubt clouding my mind. Alone, I questioned everything. Was this fight worth losing my peace? My family? But deep inside, a stubborn ember refused to die. I found myself walking toward the land as the sun dipped low. The sky blazed orange and pink, a reminder of the sunsets Grandpa loved. I stood there, feeling the cool breeze brush my face. "Grandpa," I said softly, "I don't know how much longer I can keep going. But I promise you, I won't quit. This land, our legacy, it's not theirs to take." The weight of the moment settled over me, but with it came a flicker of hope. Despite the darkness, I could still fight. That night, exhaustion tugged at me, but my resolve was reborn. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about honoring a promise and standing tall when it mattered most. I turned away from the horizon, ready to face whatever came next. I stood nervously at the front of the community center, watching neighbors trickle in, some curious, others skeptical. Jenna had helped organize the meeting, and we'd invited local reporters to shine a light on the corruption hiding in plain sight. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation. When I spoke, I kept my voice steady. This isn't just my fight. It's ours. Developers and officials have been abusing their power, threatening our homes and our history. The crowd's murmurs grew into nods of agreement. One by one, neighbors stepped forward. Mrs. Harper wiped tears as she recounted how the developers tried to seize her backyard. They said I had no rights, she said, voice trembling. But this land has been in my family for decades. We can't just give up. A man named Carlos shared his story of relentless fines and intimidation. The room was thick with emotion, loss, frustration, and the fierce will to resist. Then Jenna took the floor, holding up a folder. A whistleblower from inside the developer's team reached out to us, she announced. We now have documents proving forged permits and bribery. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw the tension ripple through the opposition's ranks. Their attempts to stall legal proceedings felt weaker, their smirks fading under the weight of truth. For the first time, I sensed real change. Looking around, I realized this fight wasn't just mine anymore. It was a movement, a stand for everyone who'd been pushed aside. Together, I said, voice firm, we're stronger than any developer or corrupt official. A swell of pride rose inside me. The unity we'd forged wasn't just powerful, it was unstoppable. And this land, our legacy, would be protected. The courtroom was tense, every word hanging heavy in the air. I sat stiff, watching as lawyers debated over evidence, witnesses taking the stand one after another. Some testified in my favor, recalling how the land had been cared for by my family for generations. Their voices steadied me. But just as hope surged, opposing counsel stepped up to discredit them, twisting words, casting doubt. I felt the pit in my stomach grow deeper with every challenge. When it was my turn, I stood, my heart pounding loud enough to drown out the murmurs. This land is more than soil and trees, I began, voice trembling but strong. It's my grandfather's legacy, the foundation of our family's history and dreams. Losing it means losing a part of who we are. I spoke of the stories he told, the sacrifices he made, and the promise I made to protect what he cherished. Then, just when it felt like the battle would drag on, a surprise witness appeared, a former employee of the developer, eyes wide with nervous resolve. I have evidence of forged documents, they confessed. The courtroom murmured, the opposition faltered. Adrenaline coursed through me, fear mingling with fierce determination. I gripped the edge of the table, reminding myself why I fought so hard, not just for land, but for justice. Every moment in that room tested me, but I refused to back down. This was my family's story, and I would make sure it was heard. The courtroom fell silent as the judge cleared his throat. After careful review, I rule in favor of the plaintiff, he announced. All development on the disputed land must cease immediately, and ownership is restored to the rightful heir. Relief hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Tears welled up, blurring the faces around me. We did it, Jenna whispered, squeezing my hand. I blinked away the tears, overwhelmed by gratitude and exhaustion. The fight that had consumed me for months was finally over. Outside the courthouse, news cameras swarmed. Reports broke of the developers and officials facing investigations, their corrupt actions exposed to the public. I heard whispers of lawsuits and resignations. Justice wasn't just a word anymore, it was real. That evening, neighbors gathered at the land's edge, sharing smiles, hugs, and stories. Mrs. Harper brought homemade pies, Carlos set up a small barbecue. Children ran through the grass that was once threatened. We stood together, a voice said beside me. I nodded, pride swelling. As I looked over the reclaimed land, I thought about the long road here, the fears, the setbacks, the moments I wanted to quit. But through it all, I learned something more than legal victory. I learned about resilience, community, and the power of standing up for what's right. This land was more than a legacy. It was a symbol of hope. And for that, I would always be grateful. The land was finally mine again, but the fight had taught me something far bigger than ownership. I stood at the edge of the property, breathing in the familiar scent of pine and earth, and began sketching plans to restore Grandpa's vision: trails for neighbors to walk, a small garden where children could play, and a memorial plaque honoring our family's history. I want this place to be a sanctuary, I told Jenna during one of our meetings. A symbol of what standing up for what's right can achieve. The months of struggle had worn me down in ways I hadn't expected. But they also built me up, teaching patience when frustration surged, resilience when fear tried to overwhelm, and courage to face whatever came next. One evening, as I sat by the fire with my family, I found myself reflecting on everything. This fight wasn't just about land, I said quietly. It was about preserving dignity, history, and hope. I thought of others facing battles like mine, knowing how easy it can be to feel powerless. If there's one thing I've learned, I told myself, it's that persistence matters. Standing firm, even when the odds are against you, can change everything. Looking ahead, I felt a peaceful strength settling in my chest. The community had rallied, and together, we were stronger. I was ready to protect this land, this legacy, and the people who called this place home. This is just the beginning, I whispered, watching the sunset. And I'm here for the long haul.